when the Canadians rode into Amsterdam, the people went crazy, mad with joy and relief at being free. It was the story of Tunis, Paris, Brussels, all over again. The story of every city liberated from the Nazis. The resistance movement came into the open. Traitors and collaborators were seized, disarmed, and marched away. They were taken to the prisons which they had filled with patriots. That one is Anton Mussert, the Dutch quisling. He knows what's coming to him. The arch-traitors are identified. That's easy enough. There's not a Dutchman who could forget the faces of Mussert and his lieutenants. But there's a lot of small fry, less known but just as guilty. They try to wriggle through the net, swearing their innocence. But the intelligence officer has caught this one. The fact that he's a member of the Dutch SS is proved by the blood mark on his arm. The patriots, the martyrs who died for freedom, are now given openly These are the last victims of the Nazis. Nazis who, outfought and outmaneuvered, were still brave enough to shoot a woman through the skull. In their remembrance rests their victory, and immortality in the hearts of those who live to have joy in freedom. The people meet to give thanks for their deliverance. After 5 years of exile, Gerbrandy, their freely elected prime minister, speaks to them, once again on Dutch soil. And they think, thank God, it's all over, at last. But it is not all over, because this war did not end when the last shot was fired. Peace has got to be made. Already, a new enemy is striking. In the square, in the middle of giving thanks, people are fainting from hunger, fatigue. For the rich fields of Holland have been ravaged, and the towns are desolate. The children have gone now, and the player has no breath for music. The master has vanished. The country is still sown with death. Everywhere is the old tale of war, the wanton, costly destruction of what men labored years to build. The orchards have been burnt and will bear no fruit. And the cattle lie roasted to cinders in their stalls. And all along the coast are the ruins of ramps from which the flying bombs were launched against England. And the men who liberated Holland see breached dikes, and thousands of acres flooded, some with fresh water which must be drained off, others with salt water which will poison the land for years to come. The houses are deserted. The families have fled, and only the garden statue remains. Where there are still farms unflooded, life is poor. There is very little left. The Germans systematically carried off the finest livestock, the Frisians that were world famous, and left the dairyman without his herds. A certain number of Germans were used in clearing minefields, but the bulk of them were marched down to the docks. They were put aboard transports bound for Germany, Holland's first post-war export. Then the people started coming back to their homes. The people from the concentration camps, the prisoners of war, deported laborers and refugees. And because this vast movement of people backwards and forwards might have spread disease, the greatest care was taken at the transit clinics. Epidemics have so far been prevented. Careful identity checks prevent war criminals escaping. It's not easy to distinguish signs of guilt from the nervous anxiety of innocent people who've been in concentration camps. Even when the people got home, their troubles hadn't ended. There was nothing to do. There was no coal for the power stations, no raw materials for the factories. Industrial life was at a standstill. There was nothing to buy, nothing to sell, and the free men, with the whole fabric of their civilization to reconstruct, had to sit around in idleness, waiting patiently until the machines, for us, are a bad sign. But in Europe, a queue is a sign of hope. It means there's something to buy. Maybe it's just a couple of pounds of beans. This winter, there won't even be beans. As there was no coal last winter, nearly all the wood blocks in the street were stolen. Even now, in order to cook, people nip out and take any fuel. This house wasn't bombed. Last winter, it was empty. One night, the neighbors, freezing with cold, stripped doors, windows, beams, and rafters, and the house just collapsed. Now they comb the debris for laths and chips of wood, the wreckage of the battle for fuel. Into the mincer goes not meat, but sugar beet. It makes a sort of syrup. There's been no coffee for years, so the coffee mill is used for grinding wheat. It grinds very coarsely and produces only the crudest sort of whole meal, a caricature of flour. You remember the catalogues of tulip bulbs before the war? Now, they're having to eat your tulips. But the tulip stem is poisonous. It's a nice calculation between having a square meal and being poisoned. Before the war, in summer, they had these little stoves for cooking because they prevented the kitchen getting over hot. Now, this is their only form of cooking and heating, winter and summer. This is an average meal for a well-off Dutch family. It is the children who suffer first. They get roundworms, which devour everything the children eat. There are thousands who have been stricken down during the occupation, the orphans, the weakly, and the poor. Supplies are coming in, but very gradually. Most of the canals are blocked with the wreckage of ships or blown locks. But the amount of supplies being allocated for Europe is not enough. Rations are way below the basic minimum laid down as necessary for health. At the food centers, they get their rations of imported food. This is not a week's ration, but a month's. In Britain, we haven't much, and it's dull. But we have enough. Soup kitchens have been opened to feed the children. There are no children in Britain like these. Children who don't know their parents, or even their own names. They are the anonymous citizens of tomorrow. Already, their hands are trembling. At the age of 8 and 10, they are the little old men and women of Europe. Under famine, everybody grows very old, very young. Unless nations with a food surplus are prepared to help more generously than they are helping at the moment, these children, who have paid the price of our victory, will never recover. And it is not just the young, it is the aged also. prematurely old. He is only 35. And that is a young girl aged 15. Some people dry up with hunger. Others swell and turn to water. Making peace is a much more gradual process than making war. You can't produce livestock on an assembly line, and you can't speed up reproduction. Recovery is going to take years and years. But the people know what they want, and they get it, however many years it takes. They don't want just the old life, the solid material comfort and the accepted ways of the past. There is a new spirit in Europe, all over Europe. After 5 long years of fighting, the men are coming home. And for a little time in these homes, there will be a little food. And for the moment, they forget that winter is coming. The hardest winter of them all.